June 12, 1944. A farmhouse kitchen in rural Pennsylvania, 3 days before departure. The morning light slants through windows still dusty from harvest season, catching particles that drift like something suspended between two worlds. Thomas Henley sits at the table his grandfather built, running his thumb along a grain in the wood worn smooth by generations of elbows and spilled coffee. His mother stands at the stove, her back to him, shoulders rigid in that particular way mothers hold themselves when they're trying not to cry. He is 22 years old. He has never been more than 50 miles from this kitchen. The papers in his pocket feel heavier than they should. Orders. Embarkation date. Unit assignment. Company C, 116th Infantry Regiment, 29th Infantry Division. Words that sound official, permanent, like they were carved into something harder than paper. His father had served in the previous war. His grandfather in the one before that. There is a photograph on the mantel, sepia-toned men in wool uniforms standing in rows, their faces serious and impossibly young. Thomas studies his own hands. Farmers' hands, scarred from barbed wire and baling hooks, strong from years of lifting feed sacks and wrestling fence posts into rocky soil. These hands know the weight of things. Hay bales. Plow handles. The warm flank of a dairy cow at dawn. Soon they will know the weight of a rifle. The weight of decisions. The weight of other things he cannot yet imagine. His younger brother, Daniel, 15 and gangly as a new colt, sits across from him attempting to appear brave. "You'll write, won't you?" Daniel asks, voice cracking slightly on the last word. "Tell me what it's really like over there." Thomas nods. What can he say? That he's terrified. That part of him still believes this is happening to someone else. That he lies awake at night trying to picture what combat actually feels like and finds only emptiness where the imagination should be. Instead, he says, "I'll write. You take care of things here." "I will." Daniel straightens, suddenly serious. "I promise." The fields outside stretch toward the horizon, orderly rows of corn just beginning to green. Everything here follows a rhythm: planting, growing, harvest, rest. War, Thomas suspects, follows no rhythm at all. It is the opposite of seasons, the opposite of continuity. It takes young men and returns them changed, if it returns them at all. His mother finally turns from the stove, setting down a plate of eggs and bacon with hands that tremble slightly. She doesn't meet his eyes. "Eat," she says quietly. "You'll need your strength." He eats, though the food tastes like nothing. Around the table, his family tries to maintain normalcy, tries to pretend this is just another morning, but the silence between words grows heavier with each passing moment. They are already mourning him, Thomas realizes. Already preparing for the possibility that this kitchen, this farm, this life might continue without him in it. Outside, a rooster crows. The world continues its ancient patterns, indifferent to the fact that in 3 days, Thomas Henley will step onto a train, then a ship, then onto foreign soil where men his age are already dying in ways the Pennsylvania morning cannot comprehend. He doesn't know it yet, but this is the last morning he will ever feel innocent. The last time he will sit at this table and simply be Thomas, son and brother and farmer, unburdened by the crushing weight of what comes next. In 3 months, he will become someone else entirely. Someone who survived. Someone who wishes he hadn't. But for now, in this kitchen filled with slanted light and unspoken fears, he is still just a young man eating breakfast, trying not to think about tomorrow, trying not to see his mother's trembling hands or his brother's desperate pride. Trying to memorize the ordinary magic of home before it becomes a memory he can no longer trust. The eggs grow cold on the plate. Outside, the corn continues growing, patient and predictable, following the only law it knows. Inside, a family sits together, suspended in that terrible space between the old life and whatever comes next, knowing everything is about to change and powerless to stop it. 3 days later, he is gone. They arrive at the marshaling area in southern England like strangers being pressed into family. Company C, 163 men drawn from farms and factories, cities and small towns, thrown together by the accident of alphabetical assignment and geographic proximity. They are farmers' sons and shop clerks, mechanics and college students who left their books mid-semester. Some are eager. Some are terrified. Most are both. Thomas finds himself in 2nd Platoon, 3rd Squad. The men become familiar through proximity and necessity: Warren, the Brooklyn kid who talks constantly to fill the silence; Martinez from New Mexico who speaks 3 languages and keeps his thoughts private; O'Connor, the platoon sergeant, 28 years old and already ancient compared to the rest of them; and Joseph McCarthy, called Mac, to distinguish him from the senator nobody trusts, a farm boy from Iowa with hands as scarred as Thomas's own. They recognize each other immediately, Mac and Thomas. Something about the way they move, the careful economy of gesture that comes from years of physical labor. While other men fumble with their rifles, treating the weapons like foreign objects, Mac and Thomas handle them with the same unconscious competence they'd apply to any tool. They clean their weapons together in comfortable silence, the kind of silence farmers know, where communication happens through presence rather than words. My old man grows corn and soybeans, Mac offers one evening, running an oiled cloth along his rifle barrel. 500 acres. You. Dairy, Thomas replies. 70 head. Some hay. Mac nods, understanding everything that isn't said. The 4 a.m. milkings. The relentless cycle of feeding and mucking and fixing things that break. The way farm life teaches you that survival depends on noticing details: a cow's labored breathing, a fence post rotting at the base, a change in the weather before the sky admits it's coming. Think those skills transfer? Mac asks, and there's something in his voice that suggests he already knows the answer. Don't know, Thomas admits. Guess we'll find out. They train together. Hours of marching, of learning to move as a unit, of coordinating fire and movement until it becomes muscle memory. The officers drill them relentlessly: advance under covering fire, maintain intervals, keep your head down, watch your sectors. The orders make sense in the abstract. On the training grounds of England, with blanks instead of bullets, it all seems manageable. Choreographed. Almost safe. At night, in the crowded Quonset huts, men reveal themselves in fragments. Warren talks about his kid sister and how she cried when he left. Martinez reads letters from home, lips moving silently over words in Spanish. O'Connor writes every night, his pencil scratching steadily across paper, and never mentions what he's writing about. Mac carves small figures from scraps of wood, birds, mostly, delicate things that seem impossible coming from such rough hands. My mother collects them, he explains when Thomas asks. Started when I was 8. Keeps them on the kitchen windowsill. Thomas thinks of his own kitchen, the morning light, his mother's trembling hands. That life already feels impossibly distant, like something that happened to a different person. They've been in England for 6 weeks. In 6 weeks, farm boys have become soldiers. Strangers have become brothers. The transformation happens so gradually that nobody notices until it's complete. But something remains. Between drills and inspections, between the sergeant's shouted orders and the nervous jokes, a quiet understanding grows. They are going to France. Soon. The invasion everyone talks about in whispers and euphemisms. The thing that will either end the war or kill them all. Probably both. The night before they board the landing craft, the platoon sits together in the dark. Someone has procured a bottle of whiskey, and it passes from hand to hand, each man taking a careful sip. Nobody speaks. There's nothing left to say. They have trained for this moment, prepared as much as any human can prepare for the incomprehensible, and now all that remains is waiting. Thomas sits beside Mac, their shoulders touching. Around them, 163 men breathe in the darkness, each one carrying his own private fears, his own memories of home, his own unspoken prayers. They are Company C. They are brothers. In 18 hours, they will wade ashore on a beach designated Omaha, and nothing will ever be the same. But for now, in this last moment before everything changes, they are together. Safe in the dark, breathing the same air, knowing that whatever comes next, they will face it side by side. That knowledge is the only comfort they have. It will have to be enough. The whiskey bottle makes another round. Someone starts singing quietly, a hymn from childhood, and other voices join in. The sound rises and falls in the darkness like a prayer, like a promise, like the last word spoken before a door closes forever. Tomorrow, they will learn what their training was really for. Tomorrow, the strangers who became brothers will face the test that will define or destroy them. Tomorrow, the world will teach them things no training manual ever mentioned, about courage and terror, about the moment when doctrine meets chaos, about how quickly everything falls apart. But tonight, they are still whole. Tonight, they are still Company C, 163 strong, bound together by something stronger than fear. Tonight, they still believe they will all make it home. They are wrong. June 6, 1944. 6:30 hours. Omaha Beach, Dog Green Sector. The landing craft hits the beach with a grinding shudder that Thomas feels through his boots, through his bones, through the rifle clutched in his white-knuckled hands. Around him, 32 men crouch in salt-soaked uniforms, their faces gray in the pre-dawn light, each one trying not to vomit, not to think, not to imagine what waits beyond the ramp that's about to drop. O'Connor moves among them, checking equipment one last time. "Remember your training," he says, voice steady despite the pallor of his skin. "Move fast. Don't bunch up. Get to the seawall." The ramp drops. What happens next will be replayed in Thomas's mind for the next 60 years, but he will never find words adequate to describe it. The sound arrives first, a roar like the world tearing itself apart. Machine guns. Artillery. The screaming of metal through air. Then comes the first man down, Martinez, stepping into water that comes up to his thighs and immediately jerking backward as if yanked by invisible strings. He disappears beneath the surf, and Thomas doesn't see him again. Men pour off the ramp into chaos. The beach is maybe 300 yards of open sand rising toward a seawall, and every inch of it is covered by German guns firing from fortified positions on the bluffs above. Geysers of sand erupt where mortar rounds land. The water churns with impacts. Men fall and don't get up, or fall and try to get up and fall again, or simply vanish beneath the surface weighed down by 60 pounds of equipment. Thomas runs because everyone is running. His boots find purchase on the sand, then lose it. He falls. Gets up. Sees Warren 3 yards to his left disintegrate when an artillery shell lands directly on him. One moment there's a person, the next there's only red mist and fragments. Thomas keeps running because stopping means dying, and some part of his brain, some primitive survival mechanism, has taken control and overridden everything else including the ability to think about what he's seeing. Mac is beside him. Thomas doesn't know how or when Mac got there, but suddenly his friend is there, running in the same impossible direction, toward the guns that are killing them, because there's nowhere else to go. Back means drowning. Here means dying. Forward is the only option that contains even the ghost of hope. "Bangalore," someone screams. "We need Bangalore torpedoes on the wire." The seawall looms ahead, maybe 50 yards away now, but 50 yards might as well be 50 miles. German machine guns have perfect interlocking fields of fire. They've had 4 years to prepare this killing ground, to measure the exact angles, to calculate precisely where invading troops will concentrate. The beach has become an abattoir. O'Connor goes down 10 yards in front of them. Thomas sees him struggle to his knees, sees him try to wave them forward, sees the burst of machine gun fire that nearly cuts him in half. The sergeant crumples, and men run past him because there's nothing else they can do. Save him or save themselves. The choice has already been made by whoever designed this beach, whoever decided the war required this particular sacrifice. Thomas and Mac reach the seawall together, press their backs against the rough concrete, gasping for air that tastes like smoke and salt and copper. Around them, maybe 15 other men from their company huddle in this temporary shelter. 15 out of 163. The math is incomprehensible. Thomas looks back toward the water and sees bodies rolling in the surf, sees men still trying to make it across the beach, sees landing craft burning, sees hell itself rendered in sand and blood and cordite. "We have to move," Mac gasps. "Can't stay here." He's right. The seawall provides only the illusion of safety. Eventually, the Germans will adjust their fire, will bring up mortars, will flush them out or kill them where they cower. Forward is still the only option, even though forward means climbing a bluff under fire, means somehow crossing another 200 yards of open ground to reach the fortified positions that are killing them. Thomas checks his rifle. Somehow, impossibly, it's still functional. His hands are shaking so badly he can barely work the action, but the weapon loads. Mac is beside him, similarly checking his equipment with hands that won't stop trembling. Their eyes meet for a moment. "Just like training," Mac says, and they both know it's a lie, but it's the lie they need. An officer Thomas doesn't recognize appears from somewhere, rallying survivors. "Bangalore on the wire," he shouts. Then we go up. Move fast, find cover, suppressing fire. The words are familiar from 1,000 training exercises, but here they sound like a foreign language. Still, men move because that's what soldiers do. Someone sets charges on the barbed wire. The explosion tears a gap. Then they're moving again, climbing, scrambling up the bluff under fire that never stops, never pauses, never gives them a moment to think or pray or do anything except keep moving or die. Thomas climbs. Mac climbs. Somehow, impossibly, they reach a small crater halfway up the bluff and dive into it. 2 other men join them, neither from their company. Everyone is mixed together now, the careful organization of units dissolved into survival groups formed by proximity and chance. Covering fire, someone yells, and Thomas raises his rifle and shoots at positions he can barely see through the smoke. Whether he hits anything is unknowable and irrelevant. The point is to make the Germans keep their heads down long enough for someone else to advance. That's the theory. The reality is chaos with a thin veneer of doctrine. They advance in rushes. 10 yards. 20. Each movement costs lives. Men Thomas doesn't know die around him. He steps over bodies, uses corpses as cover, stops thinking about them as people because if he thinks about them as people he'll go insane. Mac is still beside him. That's the only fact that matters. Mac is alive. Thomas is alive. They keep each other moving through the pure animal determination not to leave the other behind. The German fortifications loom ahead. Somehow, impossibly, a group of maybe 30 Americans has made it this far. An officer, could be a lieutenant, could be a sergeant, could be a private pretending to know what he's doing, coordinates an assault on a pillbox. Grenades. Smoke. Fire and movement. It's textbook, except in the textbook nobody is screaming, nobody is bleeding from wounds that spill themselves across the French soil, nobody is dying. But they take the position. Somehow. The Germans either die or retreat or surrender. The guns fall silent, these guns, anyway. Plenty more up and down the beach continue their harvest. But this small piece of ground is one at a price Thomas will spend the rest of his life trying to calculate. He sits with his back against the concrete wall of the pillbox, rifle across his knees, unable to move. Mac is beside him, similarly frozen. Around them, survivors check ammunition, tend to wounds, try to figure out who's in command now that the command structure has evaporated. Someone is crying. Someone is praying. Someone is laughing with the hysterical relief of someone who can't believe he's still alive. Thomas looks at Mac. Mac looks at Thomas. Neither speaks. What would they say? That they survived when most of Company C didn't? That they're still breathing when better men aren't? That they crossed a beach that should have killed them and somehow made it to the other side? The sun is higher now. Morning light illuminates a beach covered in wreckage and corpses. The tide comes in, lifting bodies and equipment and fragments of men with the same indifferent rhythm that's lifted tides since before humans existed. The war continues. Men are still dying. But Thomas and Mac are alive, sitting in the shadow of captured concrete, trying to process what just happened and failing completely. They don't know it yet, but this is the moment that will define the rest of their lives. This is when the weight settles onto their shoulders, invisible but crushing. They survived. Others didn't. The arithmetic is simple and impossible. They will carry it forever. But for now, in this moment, they are just 2 farm boys who made it off a beach where they should have died, sitting together in silence, not yet understanding that survival can be its own kind of death sentence. They stay in combat for 37 days. Hetero country. Villages with names Thomas can't pronounce. Fighting that grinds forward in yards measured against casualty lists. Company C receives replacements, fresh-faced boys who arrive with clean uniforms and wide eyes. Most don't last a week. The veterans, Thomas and Mac and the handful of others who made it off the beach, develop a sixth sense for danger, learn to read the landscape, learn which sounds mean incoming and which mean someone else's problem. They become efficient. Professional. Good at staying alive. They don't talk about the beach. Not to each other. Not to the replacements. Not to the officers who write reports about acceptable losses and gaining ground. The beach exists in their minds like a separate country, a place they visited but can't describe to people who weren't there. Words fail. Memory fragments. What remains is sensation, the taste of fear, the smell of cordite, the sound of men drowning in shallow water. Mac changes. Small things at first. He stops carving birds. Stops writing letters. Sits during breaks with his rifle across his knees, staring at nothing. Thomas tries once to ask if he's all right, and Mac looks at him with eyes that have gone flat and says, "We shouldn't have made it." Then he gets up and walks away, and Thomas doesn't ask again. July 14th. A village called St. Lo. They're dug in on the outskirts, waiting for dawn and the next push forward. German artillery has been probing all night, random shells falling in the darkness, searching for concentrations of men. Thomas is in a foxhole sharing watch with Mac, both of them exhausted beyond measure, running on coffee and fear and the stubborn refusal to die. Mac is talking. The first real conversation they've had in weeks. He's talking about Iowa, about his father's farm, about how the corn should be waist-high by now and how his little brother probably had to take over the morning chores. He's talking about home like it's something that still exists, still waits for him, still wants him back. "Think we'll make it?" Mac asks quietly. "All the way through, I mean. Think we'll actually go home?" Thomas doesn't know what to say. The odds seem impossibly long. They've already used up all the luck any two men should ever have. But Mac is looking at him, actually looking at him for the first time in weeks, and Thomas sees his friend in there still, underneath the 1,000-yard stare and the professional soldier exterior. "Yeah," Thomas lies. "We'll make it." Mac nods. He almost smiles. "Good. That's good. Because I need to tell my old man something. Need to tell him I'm sorry for all the times I complained about getting up early to milk. Need to tell him I understand now what he was teaching me." He pauses. "You understand what I mean?" Thomas understands completely. "I do." "Good." Mac settles back against the wall of the foxhole. "That's good." The shell lands at 4:17. Thomas will remember the exact time because he was checking his watch when the world exploded. Not close to their foxhole. Not even particularly near. Maybe 70 yards away, landing in a communication trench where a squad from 1st Platoon was sheltering. Just one shell among thousands the Germans have fired that week. Just another random throw of the dice that somehow comes up death. But Mac is standing. Why is Mac standing? Thomas will never understand why. Perhaps he heard something. Perhaps he saw movement. Perhaps his exhausted brain simply told him to do something and he obeyed. Whatever the reason, Mac is climbing out of the foxhole, exposing himself above the rim, standing in the open like a man who has forgotten that war exists. "Mac." Thomas reaches for him, fingers brushing fabric. "Get down." The second shell lands exactly where the first one landed, because German artillery crews are professionals who know that men will run toward casualties to help, will concentrate in areas just hit because those areas feel safer. The explosion tears through the communication trench, and Thomas sees it happen. Sees the flash. Sees Mac silhouetted against it. Sees his friend lifted and thrown backward into the foxhole like a child's toy discarded by a careless hand. Thomas catches him. Mac lands in his arms, and for just a moment Thomas thinks maybe it's not so bad, maybe the blast just knocked him down, maybe. But Mac is dying. Thomas knows it immediately. Knows it from the terrible wetness soaking through Mac's uniform, knows it from the way his friend's breath comes in short gasps, knows it from the surprise in Mac's eyes, like he can't quite believe this is happening. "Tom." Mac tries to speak. Blood bubbles at his lips. "Don't talk." Thomas cradles his friend's head, applies pressure to wounds there's no point in applying pressure to. Around them, men are shouting. Someone is calling for a medic. But Thomas knows. He knows. "Tom, I don't." Mac's voice is getting quieter. "I don't want." "It's okay." Thomas doesn't know what else to say. "It's okay. Tell my dad." Mac coughs, and Thomas has to lean close to hear. "Tell him about the birds. Tell him I kept carving them. Tell him." But Mac doesn't finish. His eyes fix on something past Thomas's shoulder, something only he can see, and the light in them simply fades. One moment a person, the next an absence. Death is anticlimactic. No dramatic final words. No peaceful closing of eyes. Just here, and then not here, and Thomas is holding a body that used to be his friend. The medic arrives too late. He takes one look and shakes his head. "I'm sorry," he says, already moving towards someone who can still be saved. Thomas stays in the foxhole, holding Mac, unable to let go. Dawn arrives. The shelling stops. Someone will eventually come and take the body away, tag it, process it, reduce Mac to paperwork and a telegram that will arrive in Iowa and destroy a family. But for now, in this moment, Thomas simply holds his friend and tries to understand how this happened. They survived the beach. Made it off that killing ground when so many didn't. 37 days of combat. 37 days of defying odds that should have killed them both. And now Mac is gone anyway, killed by a random shell that could have landed anywhere but landed exactly where it landed, and Thomas is alive, sitting in a foxhole in France, holding his friend's cooling body. Why? The question takes root in that moment. Why did Thomas survive when Mac didn't? Why did the beach spare them only to take Mac now? What cosmic equation decided that Thomas Henley deserved to keep breathing while Joseph McCarthy, who carved birds for his mother and talked about going home, had to die? No answer comes. None will. Thomas will ask this question for the next 60 years, and the silence will remain absolute. The war continues. Men come and take Mac away. Thomas is given a new foxhole partner, another replacement fresh from England. He learns the boy's name, something he'll forget within days, and they settle into the professional routine of staying alive. But something fundamental has broken inside Thomas. He continues fighting because that's what soldiers do. He follows orders. He keeps himself and others alive when he can. But he's no longer really there. Because Mac was right. They shouldn't have made it off that beach. The universe made a mistake, and now it's correcting itself one soldier at a time, and Thomas is still waiting for his correction to arrive. Except it doesn't. The war grinds on through France, through Belgium, into Germany. Thomas survives. Battle after battle, he survives. Men die around him, good men, brave men, better men than he is, and Thomas keeps breathing. He stops trying to understand it. He stops trying to make sense of the arithmetic. He simply exists, carrying Mac's death and all the others, waiting for the shell that will finally balance the books. It never comes. On May 8, 1945, the war in Europe ends. Thomas is standing in a muddy field in Germany when someone tells him he can go home. He doesn't feel relief. He doesn't feel triumph. He feels nothing except the crushing weight of a question that has no answer. Why me? September 1945. The same Pennsylvania farm. The same kitchen table with its familiar grain. Thomas sits exactly where he sat 15 months ago, but the man sitting there now bears only a physical resemblance to the young man who left. His mother stands at the same stove, cooking the same breakfast, but her hands don't tremble anymore. Why would they? Her son came home. So many mothers' sons didn't. She moves with the quiet relief of someone whose worst fear didn't materialize, preparing eggs and bacon for a miracle. Daniel, now 16 and trying not to stare, sits across the table. He has questions. So many questions. The whole town has questions. What was it like? Did you see action? Were you scared? Did you kill anyone? Did you see Paris? They ask with the eager curiosity of people who want to transform war into stories, into digestible narratives with clear beginnings and endings and meanings. Thomas can't answer. Not truthfully. So he says things like, "It was hard," and "I'm glad it's over," and "I don't really want to talk about it." The phrases become reflexive, a shield against inquiries that are both innocent and impossible to address. How does he explain the beach to people who think war looks like newsreels? How does he describe Mac's death to his brother who still plays baseball and worries about algebra tests? The farm needs him. His father's arthritis has gotten worse during the war, and there's work that's been deferred, repairs that couldn't be made with materials rationed and labor scarce. Thomas throws himself into it. He works from before dawn until after dark, pushing his body until it's too exhausted to think. Fences to mend. Roofs to patch. 70 head of dairy cattle that need tending twice daily, every day, forever. The physical labor helps. His body remembers this rhythm even if his mind remains elsewhere. He can milk a cow while part of him is still in a foxhole outside St. Lo. He can mend fence while another part is running across a beach where men are dying. The work continues regardless. Animals don't care about your internal landscape. They need to be fed whether you're whole or broken, whether you're haunted or at peace. But nights are different. Nights are when the discipline cracks. He dreams of the beach so vividly that he wakes gasping, convinced he's drowning, convinced machine guns are still firing. He dreams of Mac dying in his arms over and over, an endless loop of the same moment replaying with slight variations. Sometimes Mac speaks. Sometimes he's already dead when Thomas reaches him. Sometimes Thomas tries to pull him down into the foxhole and succeeds, and Mac lives, and they laugh about the close call, and then Thomas wakes and has to remember all over again that Mac is dead. He writes to Mac's family. Labors over the letter for weeks, trying to find words that will provide comfort, that will explain what happened, that will convey what Mac meant. The result is inadequate, a few paragraphs that say Mac died quickly, didn't suffer, was a good soldier and a better friend. All lies of omission. He doesn't mention the blood. Doesn't mention how Mac choked trying to speak. Doesn't mention the terrible randomness of it, how if Mac had stayed in the foxhole for 3 more seconds he'd be alive. The response arrives 2 months later. Mac's mother thanks him for writing. She says it helps to know Mac wasn't alone at the end. She asks if Thomas would like to visit sometime, see Mac's room, see the collection of carved birds on the kitchen windowsill. She says Mac wrote about Thomas in his letters, called him the best friend he'd made in the service. Thomas can't go. Can't face those people who lost their son while Thomas lived. Can't stand in that kitchen and look at those wooden birds and explain why Mac is dead and Thomas is breathing. He writes back apologizing, says maybe someday, knows that someday will never come. Months pass. The farm settles into its rhythms. Thomas gets better at pretending. He learns to smile when his mother watches him, learns to make conversation with neighbors, learns to attend church and stand for hymns and bow his head during prayers for the fallen. From the outside, he looks like a veteran adjusting successfully to civilian life. From the inside, he's barely holding together. He starts drinking. Not obviously. Not enough that anyone notices. But alone in his room after everyone else is asleep, he keeps a bottle hidden and takes careful sips until the edges soften, until the dreams recede just enough to allow a few hours of unconsciousness. He tells himself it's temporary. A crutch while he adjusts. In a few months, he'll be fine. Years pass instead. Thomas never leaves the farm. Never marries. Never ventures more than 20 miles from the place he was born. This is not a conscious decision so much as the gradual calcification of avoidance into lifestyle. Leaving means engaging with the world, and the world contains too many questions he can't answer, too many people who didn't serve, too many men who came home whole. He becomes the reliable one. The son who stayed. The bachelor uncle who's always available to help with harvest, to fix machinery, to be present at family gatherings where he sits quietly in corners and lets conversation flow around him. His nephew, Daniel's son, grows up thinking Uncle Thomas is just naturally quiet. Reserved. A little sad maybe, but kind and dependable and always willing to show a boy how to properly set a fence post or read a cow's mood. The nightmares never stop. They evolve, become more sophisticated in their torture. Now when he dreams of the beach, he's not running toward the seawall, he's standing still while everyone around him dies. He's walking slowly, untouched by bullets that cut down men to his left and right. He's immortal while everyone else is fragile, and he can't understand why, can't grasp what makes him different, can't accept the mathematical impossibility of his survival. Sometimes he dreams he's the one who died, and Mac came home instead. In these dreams, he watches Mac return to Iowa, marry a nice girl, raise children, farm his father's land. He watches Mac live the life Thomas is living, except Mac deserves it. Mac earned his survival. Thomas just happened to be lucky, which isn't the same thing at all. He reads the newspaper coverage of Omaha Beach retrospectives. The 10th anniversary. The 20th. The heroism praised, the sacrifice honored, the victory celebrated. The articles never mention the ones who made it off the beach and died anyway, the ones who survived the impossible only to fall to random shells or stupid accidents or the simple grinding attrition of prolonged combat. Mac isn't in those stories. He's a casualty number, a name on a memorial wall somewhere, if anyone bothered to build one. Thomas visits the memorial once. Makes the drive to Washington, D.C., finds Mac's name etched in marble, stands there with dozens of other pilgrims touching stone names and crying for people they lost. He can't touch Mac's name. Can't perform the ritual that's supposed to bring closure. Because touching Mac's name means acknowledging that Mac is really gone, and some part of Thomas has never accepted that. Some part of him is still in that foxhole, still holding his friend, still believing that if he just applies enough pressure, Mac will keep breathing. He develops routines, rituals that help contain the damage. Every morning at exactly 4:17, the moment Mac died, Thomas stops whatever he's doing and is still for 1 minute. He doesn't pray. Doesn't say anything. Just stops and acknowledges the moment when the world became unbalanced, when the cosmic equation subtracted Joseph McCarthy and left the wrong man alive. People in town talk. They always do in small towns. Sad about Thomas Henley, they say. The war changed him. They're right and wrong. The war didn't change him, the war created someone new, wearing Thomas's face and living Thomas's life but not really Thomas at all. The person who sat at the kitchen table in June 1944, innocent and frightened and whole, ceased to exist on a beach in France. What came back was something else. His father dies in 1963. His mother in 1971. Daniel takes over the main house, and Thomas moves into the smaller cottage on the property, the one that used to house farmhands. He prefers it. Prefers the solitude, the ability to organize his days around the demands of grief rather than the expectations of family. He's 63 years old when he finally tells someone the truth. His nephew's son, Daniel's grandson, 18 years old and about to leave for college, mentions casually that he's thinking about joining ROTC. The words pierce through Thomas's careful armor. Don't, he says, more sharply than intended. The boy looks startled. Why not? Thomas tries to explain. Tries to talk about the beach, about Mac, about how surviving when others don't will poison everything that comes after. But the words emerge broken, inadequate. The boy listens politely, the way young people listen to old men they think are paranoid, and says he'll consider it. He joins anyway. Thomas sees him off with the same terrible sense of watching history repeat itself, except this time it's different wars, different countries, different names for the same fundamental reality, young men going to places where they might die, and the ones who come back carrying the ones who didn't. Thomas lives to 91. Outlives his brother, outlives most of the other Omaha Beach survivors, outlives the war by 69 years. Every one of those years is borrowed time, stolen from men who deserved it more. He knows this. Has always known this. The arithmetic never changes no matter how many decades pass. In his final years, he finally accepts visitors. Documentary filmmakers seeking oral histories. Students writing papers. Veterans groups building databases. They come with cameras and recorders and earnest faces, and they ask him to tell them about D-Day, about Omaha Beach, about what it was like to be part of the greatest generation. He tells them about Mac instead. Tells them about a farm boy from Iowa who carved birds, who survived the impossible, who died for no reason at all except that shells land where they land and some men are standing in the wrong place. He tells them about carrying Mac's death for 69 years, about how survival can be its own punishment, about how every moment of his life has been shadowed by the knowledge that he's living time that belonged to someone else. The interviewers are uncomfortable. They want heroism, want tales of bravery and brotherhood and triumph. They don't want an old man crying for a friend dead 7 decades, don't want to hear that survival sometimes feels like theft, don't want to confront the possibility that making it home isn't always the blessing everyone assumes. But Thomas tells them anyway. Because someone should know. Someone should understand that the war didn't end in 1945, that some battles continue in the silent hours before dawn when old men wake from dreams of beaches and dying friends, that victory has a cost that appears on no casualty list. His nephew's grandson survives his deployment. Comes home changed in ways Thomas recognizes immediately. They don't talk about it. Don't need to. The look in the young man's eyes says everything. He survived. Others didn't. The weight has been passed to another generation, a burden that apparently transcends time and conflict and circumstance. Thomas dies on a June morning, 74 years almost to the day after he left this kitchen for the last time as an innocent man. His family gathers. They speak of his long life, his reliability, his service to country and community. At the funeral, someone reads his obituary, which mentions his service in World War II, his participation in the Normandy invasion, his Purple Heart and Bronze Star for valor. What the obituary doesn't mention, that he spent 69 years asking why. That he carried Mac's death the way some men carry photographs, always present, always heavy, always defining everything that came after. That he died still believing the universe made a mistake on a beach in France, sparing the wrong man, leaving the wrong one to carry forward. But maybe that's the point. Maybe survivor's guilt isn't a mistake or a flaw in human psychology. Maybe it's the most honest response to the fundamental arbitrariness of survival. Maybe Thomas understood something that others missed, that making it home doesn't mean you get to stop carrying the ones who didn't. That every breath you take belongs partly to them. That you don't get to lay down the weight just because the war ended. The farm is still there. Now owned by the fifth generation of Henleys, worked by Thomas's great-nephew, the one who came back from Iraq. The cottage where Thomas spent his final decades sits empty, preserved like a museum to a man nobody quite understood. In the cottage's main room, on a shelf by the window, sits a small carved bird. Pine, worn smooth by decades of handling. Thomas never explained where he got it. Never told anyone that he found it in Mac's pocket after Mac died, that he carried it through the rest of the war, that he took it out every day for 69 years and held it, feeling the marks of Mac's knife, the evidence of his friend's hands and talent and humanity. The bird faces east, toward France, toward a beach that's now a memorial park where tourists take photographs and guides recite statistics about heroism and sacrifice. The tide comes in and out with the same rhythm it's followed for millennia, indifferent to the blood that once stained the sand, indifferent to the men who died there and the ones who survived and spent their lives wishing they hadn't. Mac's name is on a wall. Thomas's name is on a tombstone not far from his parents, his brother, the generations of Henleys who lived and died without ever leaving Pennsylvania. To someone looking at those stones, they're just names and dates. There's nothing to indicate the invisible thread connecting them, the weight Thomas carried, the guilt that shaped his entire life. But maybe that's appropriate. Because the real memorial isn't carved in stone. It's in the thousands of men who came home and spent their lives haunted by the ones who didn't. It's in the nightmares that persist decades after the last shot was fired. It's in the quiet moments when survivors stop and remember specific faces, specific voices, specific deaths that could have been theirs. Survivor's guilt is often discussed as a disorder, something to be treated and overcome. Therapists offer strategies for managing it, for accepting that survival isn't a crime, for understanding that the guilt serves no purpose. And perhaps they're right. Perhaps Thomas could have had a fuller life, could have married and traveled and let go of the weight he carried. But perhaps that misses something essential. Perhaps Thomas understood instinctively what others couldn't articulate, that the ones who died deserved to be carried forward. That forgetting them, moving on completely, accepting survival without question, is its own kind of betrayal. That guilt, however painful, is sometimes the most honest way to honor absence. He never carved birds. Never learned how. But he kept Mac's bird safe for 69 years, and in his will, he left instructions that it should be sent to Iowa, to whatever remained of Mac's family. The bird made it. Arrived at a farmhouse and was delivered to Mac's younger brother, 94 years old, the last person alive who remembered Joseph McCarthy as a person rather than a name. The brother wrote back. Said he'd put it with the others on the kitchen windowsill, where Mac's mother had kept them until she died. Said it belonged there, with the other birds Mac carved, the ones that outlived him, the ones that still face east toward the morning light, waiting for a man who will never come home. That's the legacy. Not valor, not heroism, not the medals Thomas never wore. Just a small carved bird making its way home, carrying with it the memory of two farm boys who survived a beach where they should have died, one of whom got to live and one of whom didn't, and the incomprehensible weight that simple fact created. Thomas Henley's life was shaped by a single question without an answer: why him? He never found peace with that question. Never accepted the mathematics of survival. Never stopped feeling that he was living on borrowed time, inhabiting space that belonged to Mac, breathing air that should have filled another man's lungs. Maybe that was his burden to carry. Maybe that was the price of survival. Not just living, but living with the knowledge that living itself is sometimes a theft, a cosmic error, a mathematical impossibility that nevertheless occurred and can never be unmade. The war ended in 1945. Thomas's war never ended. It continued every morning at 4:17, every nightmare, every moment he looked in a mirror and saw a man who had no right to be there. It continued until the morning he died, finally releasing him from a sentence 69 years long. And perhaps that's the truest memorial of all. Not to the ones who died, but to the ones who survived and spent their lives dying anyway, one day at a time, carrying the weight of absence, honoring the dead in the only way they knew how, by never forgetting, never forgiving themselves, never accepting the gift of survival without acknowledging its cost. Mac is still dead. Thomas is now dead too. The war continues to echo, finding new generations to haunt, new survivors to burden with impossible questions. The beach remains, the birds remain, the carved pine and morning light and empty spaces where people used to be. What remains is the question. Why me? Why did I survive when they didn't? What makes my life worth the cost of theirs? Thomas never found an answer. Perhaps there isn't one. Perhaps the question itself is the memorial, the testimony, the final honest accounting of what war takes and what it leaves behind. Not just bodies on a beach, but souls in farmhouses, carrying the dead forward, living borrowed time, shaped entirely by the weight of guilt that comes from the simple, incomprehensible act of survival. That weight shaped Thomas's life completely. It defined his choices, limited his world, colored every moment with the shadow of absence. It was his burden and his purpose, his prison and his memorial, the way he honored the friend who died in his arms and all the others who fell when he didn't. In the end, that's what survives. Not victory. Not defeat. Just the terrible weight of being the one who lived, and the question that weight creates, echoing forward through time, finding new voices to ask it, generation after generation, war after war, survivor after survivor, each one carrying the same incomprehensible burden. Why me? Why not them? What do I do with this life that should have been theirs? The silence offers no answer. It never has. It never will. But the question remains, carved as deeply as any name on any memorial, as permanent as guilt, as heavy as survival, as true as the morning light that continues to rise over fields that once knew peace, then war, then peace again. But never innocence. That was the price. That was always the price. And Thomas paid it, every day, for 69 years. Until finally, he was free.